Hi, in this PowerPoint video lecture, I want to introduce another type of idea from Bain that you can respond to in your paper, a quote. This is different than what we talked about last time where we looked at a term. And in many ways, looking at terms is the easiest way to respond to Bain's texts, especially if you're interested in keeping responses to one paragraph. So I'm not here to suggest that responding to a quote is a requirement, but I'm just trying to open up options, giving you more creative possibilities, which, as you'll see in one of my examples in this PowerPoint, is one of the things I've been trying to work on as a teacher, giving more options, opening up more possibilities, and not keeping students trapped into one formula. So as we think about how to explain, apply, and evaluate Bain, writing one paragraph is one approach, but there are also ways of thinking about Bain in terms of your paper having sections. And one section of your paper could be a response to a quote from Bain that's a little more complex than a simple term. So I decided to look at this quote. If you understand how you think and work, you have more control over who you will become. This was actually chosen for me by a group of students in class as an example of a quote they were interested in writing about and seeing how I would attack it. Again, I won't read the paragraph to you, but what you can see here is that I am mixing paraphrasing in my own words with exact words from Bain, that I'm citing the page that I got the quote on, and I'm also citing a reference to a related term, metacognition, that Bain uses earlier in the text. So you might want to pause for a second and read this explain section. All I'm trying to do is answer the question, what does Bain mean? That's what we're doing in the explain question section. Our guiding question is, what does Bain mean? So once I've explained the term and answered that question, what does Bain mean? Then I move on to application. And a way to think about application is the guiding question here is, how does this apply in my life? Or how could this apply in my life? Now, what I wanted to do is show you how the application could be longer and how the application could be mixed. So in this application of the Bain quote that I just presented, I'm going to have a paragraph about the positive potential application and another paragraph that has a more negative application. So you can see that this discussion of one quote from Bain is going to take me at least into 3 paragraphs and possibly even 4. You'll notice I've highlighted in brown the positive statement that I want to make, as I apply it, here's how it's worked positively in my life. And then I go through and I explore an example of how thinking about how I think has made me a better teacher. Again, you might want to pause this slide and carefully read through the paragraph. I've also posted this as a sample essay that you can find right along with this video lecture. Now, I want to say more. I couldn't fit everything I wanted to say about this quote from Bain in one paragraph. I wanted to look at positive and negative. Now, it's possible that I could have looked at both positive and negative in one paragraph, but in this case I had more to say and I wanted to give fully elaborated examples for each. And so we're now at a place where we've kind of looked already at a 3-paragraph structure. I've got an explanation where I answer the question, what does Bain mean? I've got a positive application where I'm looking at how it applies to my life in a positive way. And now I've got a paragraph that's sort of questions what I talked about in the previous paragraph. And so I'm up to 3 paragraphs in this section. Notice how the paragraph begins with a nice subordinate clause that creates a link between the previous paragraph and this one. This is a great example of subordination as a transition tool. Although metacognition has enhanced my teaching in powerful ways, I have sometimes counterproductively obsessed over metacognition, etc. And again, you might want to pause the video here if you want to read this whole paragraph. I think it's worthwhile reading the whole paragraph, but I'm just going to sort of comment here. Like the paragraph before it, this paragraph digs into one particular example. In the previous paragraph, on the positive side, the example was how metacognition has helped me better construct my assignments. In this slide, on the negative side, the example is a really scary experience I had where I was obsessively working on a federal grant right up until the deadline, and I I almost missed the deadline, and that would have cost my college $1 million and the students who benefited from that grant life-changing experiences. So it's just an awful example of where my tendency to metacognate can lead to some problems, to say the least. Now, once I've given my explanation, what does Bain mean, and I've moved into my application, how does this apply to my life, in this case in a positive way, in another case and also in a negative way, then I need to evaluate. I need to wrap it up. I need to make a big picture summary of overall what do I think of this quote. And so I've written a paragraph that sums up my mixed feelings and says, on the one hand, I think this is a good thing. On the other hand, I have problems with this. And you'll note that I come up with a recommendation, an idea of what we should do in the future. And for me, it's that balance, right, between thinking about how we think, but also realizing that we can never think through everything. We can never create the perfect paper, never create the perfect argument, that ultimately all of our thinking is to some degree contingent and tentative, always open to reworking, and that sometimes we just need to close the folder and turn it in. We need to give some closure, give our wheels a chance to stop spinning, I think is the line I use at the end. So I have tried to, in this presentation, shown you that quotes can be challenging to respond to because they introduce multiple elements, and you have to keep focused. You have to figure out what exactly in this quote do I want to talk to and about, and that's why the explanation section is so strong. But I also wanted to, I'm sorry, the explanation section is so important. But I also wanted to point out to you that you can expand this. If you've got a quote that you think talks about multiple ideas that you need to talk more about, go for it and dig into those possibilities in your explanation section and in your application section. And don't worry so much about jamming everything into one paragraph. Jamming everything into one paragraph is fine if that works for you. But you can also expand and try different things. And that's what I'm trying to introduce in this PowerPoint. And if you see this PowerPoint as sort of in dialogue with the previous one that looked at an example of doing these three things in one paragraph, I think you're getting a toolbox that gives you different ways of responding to this text and different ways of structuring your paper. I encourage you to go back and look at the sample essay that the sample paragraphs and sections that include this material so you can get a sense of how it contrasts with the first section of the paper. Lots of possibilities here. Feel free to email, text, or call if you have questions about how to make this work in your particular paper. And please remember, I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm not saying you have to follow a multiple paragraph format or a single paragraph format. That's for you to decide. The key thing to recognize is that you are going to be doing the same kinds of thinking, explaining, applying, and evaluating, regardless of the approach that you take in terms of structuring a paragraph or a section. Thanks a lot. See you out there in the course.